That's a long period of time. I was thinking about the instruction thing, different events and instruction that covers from 60s up into the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'd skip one area of instruction that enters my mind. It's kind of a special place for me. When I was at Lockheed, I was pretty much a junior pilot when I went to work there, because all the people at Lockheed had at that time were retirees or fade outs, whatever you want to call them, from SAC. People that had flown the B-47 in SAC. And that's what we were making there at Lockheed, was B-47. So they naturally went out and hired B-47 pilots. And so then after a while they needed some more, I guess. They began to hire outside people, and I don't know how many they had. In addition to the SAC pilots, they must have had half a dozen at least of just people they found out outside like me. And a friend of mine that I had been flying with in Marietta and at McCollum there since the war, Lloyd Harris, had gotten a job there at Lockheed as a pilot there, and he became chief pilot at Lockheed after probably 6 or 7 years. And then in '55, when I went to work for Lockheed, he was chief pilot. No, he wasn't chief pilot then. Doug Martin was, what did I say his name? Martin? Bud Martin. I knew it didn't sound right. Bud Martin was chief pilot in '55, and Lloyd was assistant chief pilot by then. And Bud Martin was the one that hired me. Lloyd, what I was going to try to tell you, that Lloyd, being a good friend all that time, when he saw they needed another pilot about then, at that time I didn't have a very strong job, so he told me I could get a job there if I wanted. So I said yeah. So he took me in there, and Bud hired me, and I went to work for Lockheed and flew B-47s. And the main point of this story is that instruction-wise, I was a junior pilot, and of course I had to go through co-pilot status and finally get checked out as pilot. And even as co-pilot, before I got checked out as pilot, these SAC pilots at first, I was a new guy in the office, and when they put up my schedule board, they put their name up, and they'd look around and see who they wanted as co-pilot, and the scheduler, dispatcher would usually give them whatever they wanted, didn't matter. And so I didn't get called on very much by these guys. But gradually, after I'd been there a year or two, the word began to get around, I guess, and I began to go into the office and look at the board, and there was my name on the board very frequently with these SAC pilots. All of a sudden, I was the most desirable co-pilot in the outfit, and it took me a while to find out why. But I finally figured out that, by and large, these SAC pilots could not find their way home, to put it bluntly. It wasn't exactly true, but it was borderline true. And and the first time I started flying in the airplane, I had a little handbook that I kept with me and put down things I learned, and airplane things, and a few nav things came to my attention. And we were flying a 300-mile radius from Lockheed for the flight test. It was our approved area, and they'd get out in this area and get lost. We had to wander around to find our way home. And I had on this little book, I had drawn with just a pencil drawing of sectional chart, or whack chart of the area that we had, put the major checkpoints in there, and just drawn a line from each one of those to Lockheed Marietta, and put a heading on there. And I found very quickly that they would get up here and get out in this area and say, well, let's see now, we through, we got to go home, which way is that? And I just got my book out and say, well, there's that, there's that. Take 210 degrees. And that got very popular very quickly. Everybody wanted me along to tell them how to get home. And so that popularized me with the group there. Good enough. And then after that, I got promoted to pilot there, and within the group there were no instructors, FA instructors in there. Lockheed, one of the basic facts here was that Lockheed, being an aircraft manufacturer, had the privilege, I don't know where in the regulation it says this, but I know we operate this way. Our flight department kept our own log books, and we logged time by definitions that Lockheed wanted, not the FAA. And so our logbooks didn't exactly match the FAA's. And so I undertook, after I'd been there quite a few years, to change Lockheed's method there so it matched up with the FAA's, so FAA would accept all our log time and methods and everything. And got that flight operations relationship to the FAA smooth, so there wasn't any problem after that, because about the late 60s in there, Lockheed pilots began to quit Lockheed and go out and try to get jobs in civil aviation, and they had to have ratings. And so the FAA developed, I guess, their criteria for ratings. They started issuing ratings. If you qualified, they issued what the FAA issued, what it took to qualify. And so you could go out and get a rating then on a B-47 or a C-130 or a C-141, and eventually in the Jetstar and the C-5. And so it was a good thing I got all these logs things so they could take all those records and take them and get those ratings easily. All you had to do to get a rating in that sense was that if you'd been flying a B-47 for what on your logbook looked like 100 hours or something like that, I've forgotten the time, the limits they had a time for each one. Then they would just look at your logbook and they just write out your license, say type rating B-47. Or they used a civil equivalent of B-47. There was some number for it, I don't know what, Boeing something or other. And so all this logging and so forth worked out eventually to be an advantage for all of that, for getting ratings. And that was an instructional situation, I guess I'm trying to describe, that was a good experience for me and helped Lockheed and the pilots there a good bit.